Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, where we're closing in on 100 subscribers, where they have access to over 4,200 fighter profiles spanning 17 different promotions from all over the world. Well, obviously, the Contender series is in full swing right now, and that's where they're able to take most advantage of utilizing this service. But not just that, we also have LFA, PFL, Road to UFC, KSW, OKTAGON, Cage Warriors, Bellator, all these other promotions. Again, just to close out the month, we have the Contender Series, PFL, LFA, Road to UFC, and KSW, all going down over the next 7 to 10 days. So you guys can have access to direct links to past fights for all the competitors on all these cards. I make daily updates to the schedule to ensure that we have all the fighters updated. Everything's there for your schedule. And yeah, check it out for free with a 7-day free trial. Link for that is in the description below. See what all the hoopla is about. And if you study up and like to predict your own fights, break down fights as a handicapper, an analyst, a coach, a fighter, I promise you this will save you a boatload of time to help you research on these upcoming fights. 7-day free trial. Link in the description below. That is the MMA Fight Archive. All right. I do appreciate you guys bearing with me as I was battling tonsillitis earlier this week. I'm 95% better, not coughing as much as it was earlier in the week. So obviously there was a delay in the UFC card breakdown that dropped yesterday. PFL I was hoping to drop on Wednesday for you guys, but it is Thursday evening now, so getting around to it as quickly as I can, or as effectively as I can. But I also have LFA, Road to UFC, and KSW to break down still, but all of those will strictly be in written form on the MMALOTN Patreon page. Once again, that's the Lock of the Night Patreon page, which you can find in the description below. Again, I put hours and hours into this damn thing, and that is how, that is essentially my tip jar. As just the way that I ask for support from you guys in terms of doing this thing full time and continuing to do it full time through the support that you guys provide through those Patreon pages. So appreciate the love, appreciate the support. And if you want those breakdowns, like I said, LFA, Road to UFC, and KSW Patreon page. All right, let's get into this PFL 9 2024 breakdown. This is the opening round of the playoffs for the welterweights and the featherweights. So those 4 fights will be pretty much headlining this card. We do have 5 other fights on the card. One fight fell out on weigh-in day, between Luka Poklit and Eric Alaquin. Alaquin failed his medicals, was unable to make it to the scale, and there was a very close call with Mohamed Berkhamov missing weight on his first attempt, managing to make it on the second attempt, and now that fight has been saved as well. So 9 total fights on this card. If you guys have watched my previous PFL breakdowns, you guys know I am usually a little bit more brief and concise with these PFL breakdowns rather than going as in depth as I normally do with my UFC breakdowns. So, if there is still a play that you are wondering why I ended up going on that side as opposed to the other, drop a comment below. I'm more than happy to have some discourse in the comment section. Otherwise, these are the plays that I got for you, or these are the predictions that I got for you guys coming up. So let's get right into it. First fight of the night, Shido Boris Esperanca coming in at minus 625, going up against Tyler Hill. Shido, I believe, is a signee of the PFL Africa promotion that obviously Francis Ngannou is responsible for. I believe they're going to pretty much come into fruition in 2025, but this is one of the guys that they're going to lean on to kind of be the flag bearer for that promotion, as well as somebody in the next fight. But he is a wrestler. Tyler Hill has been pretty much a regional journeyman fighting mixed martial arts, but also mixing it up in the bare knuckle MMA and bare knuckle boxing worlds, but this is a guy that's very average, maybe even below average, has some decent striking, but his flaw seems to come when guys are able to take him to the mat, and that's exactly what Shido is going to be looking to do here. Minus 625 is a little bit wide for me to trust in a guy that's still kind of green in his career, but considering the grappling edge that you should hold in this matchup, I suspect that we'll see him actually pick up a sub in this fight, and that's the prop that I'll be leaning on rather than paying the minus 625. So give me Shido Esperanca by submission. Next up, we got Maxwell Jandu Nana coming in at -400, going up against Kent Mafileo coming in at +300 in this heavyweight matchup. I was expecting to see Nana be a very raw, very rugged, and very sloppy heavyweight that just relied heavily on his power, but I was very surprised, even from his first professional fight that I have tape on. This is a guy that moves amongst the cage very well, has some good technical striking, comes from a Sambo background, so that makes sense as to why he looks so clean when he got into the MMA cage. And he's not that bad. You know, there are going to be overall mixed martial art things that he's going to have to refine, but in these first couple of fights throughout his career, his striking alone and his Sambo alone will be more than helpful to get his hand raised. I expect him to do that here against Mafileo, who's actually a slugger from Utah. Was I believe 6-1 leading up to this matchup. His lone defeat came at the hands of former UFC fighter Jared Vanderaa, but for the most part, Mafileo has been going out there and knocking these guys out, and a lot of them, let's be honest, tomato cans, just running through them and landing big shots and getting them out of there. Good power, decent durability. It seems like he struggles a little bit in the jiu-jitsu realm if fights ever find themselves there. Again, his lone defeat coming by guillotine choke as Vanderaa kind of sold out for that choke and jumped on it and managed to get the tap. But I expect this to be a striking matchup. Mafileo will obviously have the ability to land that big power and potentially put Nana out. But Nana's footwork, movement is pretty good for a heavyweight and somebody of his stature. And I expect his punches to be quicker to the target. And I expect him to eventually knock out Mafileo, winning this fight by the second round. Next up, Jesse Stirn coming in at +350, going up against Jose Perez coming in at -450. Jesse Stirn was actually 0-2 in the PFL back in 2021, but has managed to put together 5 straight victories, including his return to the PFL late last year, where he was able to pick up a win over Josh Blyden. That night, he stopped the takedowns and also utilized his striking approach to put together very slick combinations to touch up Blyden and end up winning that fight on the scorecards. He did hurt him very badly throughout that matchup, showcasing how good of a striker he can be. But the fact that he has 22 fights worth of experience on the regional scene makes me believe that he's live as an underdog here against Jose Perez, who's going to be making his PFL debut. This is the former CFFC champion coming over from there. He was a bit of a hot commodity on the free agent market. The UFC showed no interest in him, so he decided to go to the PFL, and thus he's going to be fighting a guy in Jesse Stirn who will clearly push him. Perez showcased very slick striking, good combinations, good footwork, good cage awareness in terms of actually trying to pivot off and control the center of the cage as much as possible. He has a good wrestling game if he needs to lean on it, although I do think as he takes steps up in competition, it'll be harder for him to land those takedowns and be as devastating as he was from the top position as he was in his last matchup against Chris Vasile. And I think he's going to face a tough test here in Jesse Stirn, who is very experienced and can match him in the striking realm. Perez is hittable, and we've seen him get very badly damaged with bad cuts and a lot of blood in some of his fights, but he's still gone out there and won those rounds, even though or aesthetically it doesn't look like he is actually winning them. Stirn will make him pay for being hittable, and I think this will play out much closer than the +350 on Jesse Stirn indicates. So I'm actually going to go out on a limb here, go with the experienced regional guy, go with Jesse Stirn to stop the takedowns, be competitive in the striking realm, and hopefully come out with a decision victory. Next up, Tyler Diamond coming in at +130, going up against Enrique Barzola, who comes in at -150. Now, Diamond pulled off an upset last time around against Brett Johns, and I was very surprised in that. We saw Diamond pick up the first round ever so slightly with getting a little bit more control. In the second round, we saw Brett Johns pretty much enjoy the entire second round on top of Tyler Diamond. And then in the third round, Diamond had a scramble that he was able to get the better of and kept Johns on his back. I was very surprised that John settled for that position and threw up a couple of half-fast submissions, but rather just staying on his back and allowing Diamond to grind that fight out, which was why Diamond ended up winning that fight by decision. I expected more urgency from Johns, but I think that's what we're getting here with Enrique Barzola, who has a very good wrestling game of his own. Obviously, on paper, Diamond is the better technical wrestler, but I think Barzola's MMA wrestling will end up being superior here. Also, add in the fact that Barzola is a guy that does not settle for bad positions. You can even look back at his last fight against Timur Khizriev. matchup where obviously Khizriev was the far superior fighter there, but we saw some good resistance from Barzola throughout that matchup, from the striking to the grappling and never settling for bad positions. He often was looking to work back to his feet when he was taken down, fighting the lock whenever his opponent had that clinch against the cage, and then getting back out into distance where he was able to put the pressure on his opponents as he's normally known to do. And I expect him to do that very successfully here against Tyler Diamond. Now, Diamond is a guy that I've backed in the past. He cashed as an underdog for me against Otto Rodriguez, but I think here against Barzola, he's going to struggle with the pressure and the cardio advantage that we're going to see from Barzola. And again, the main thing, the unwillingness to accept a bad position, and that's going to cause Diamond a ton of issues here. And I think we'll see Diamond actually be the one that's working off of his back for the majority of this matchup. So I'm going to go Barzola pretty heavy here, and I'm going to pick him to win this matchup by decision. Next up, Ray Cooper III coming in at plus 290, going up against Muhammad Berkhamov, who's coming in at minus 365. Now, Ray Cooper is actually 1-3 over his last 4 fights. He was able to pick up a 24-second knockout over Brett Cooper in that midst, but for the most part, this guy seems like he's pretty much checked out of the MMA game. If I'm not mistaken, he has 2 PFL titles to his name, $2 million paychecks, and he's probably just over the MMA game at this stage of his career. We know he has big power in his hands, and if he really wants to, he has a good enough wrestling game to go out there and grind his opponents out, but it's his ability to throw big power and knock his opponents out that has made him so successful in the PFL cage, but not so much as of late. We've seen him get grinded out. We've seen him get finished from exhaustion as well, and I think that Berkhamov is more than capable of doing that. Cooper will be very dangerous in the striking realm, so that's something that Berkhamov is going to have to be cautious about, which is why I'm not too hot on that minus 365 line, but I do think that he should do a good enough job in terms of keeping Cooper on the defensive, grinding this fight out, and ending up winning it on the scorecards. Next up, rematch in the first of 2 welterweight playoff matchups here. We got Shamil Musaev coming in at minus 335, going up against Murad Ramazanov coming in at plus 275. Now, these guys actually rematched in their last match, initially threw down in their last matchup back in April. And that was a night that I felt pretty big on Murad Ramazanov, as I was not impressed with Musaev's grappling defense from what I saw on the regional scene. But it's clear he's worked on that diligently, which is why Ramazanov struggled to maintain top position. And even though he may have grinded out that first round enough, and you could possibly score that in favor of Musaev as well with the damage that he was landing in the last minute of that first round, it was obvious that Ramazanov was going to have a very tough time in terms of establishing his top position and keeping Musaev on the mat. Last time around, I believe Murad was roughly around minus 125 going into fight day, had a bunch of steam come on him by fight time, pushing him up to about minus 220, and now he finds himself as a plus 275 underdog. Now, I was big on Ramazanov that night, so I should be good enough to at least take a bite on him here, but I do see myself actually switching my pick, but not so much to the point that I'm actually going to bet Musaev. If Musaev's takedown defense is as good as it showcased last time around, he should be able to keep Ramazanov off of him, and then from there implement his striking advantage, and then eventually put Ramazanov out once again. It's not often that 2 MMA fights go the same way as their previous fight, and rematches don't normally go the way as their first fight, especially when you have 2 high-level opponents like this. But just seeing how good of a takedown defense we saw from Musaev last time around, I believe he'll be able to keep this in the striking realm again and find that knockout. But I'm not willing to pay the chalk at minus 335. I'm willing to eat the defeat from the first fight, switch sides in terms of predictions here, but just stay off of it in terms of a betting perspective and pick Musaev to win this fight by knockout. All right, next up, going down to the featherweights, we got Gabriel Alves Braga coming in at plus 325, going up against Timur Khizriev, who comes in at minus 425. Now, Braga is a guy that I've always been big on throughout his PFL career. Obviously, he came up short against Jesus Pinedo, and that's the lone defeat on his professional record to date. But I still have some concerns in terms of his ability to just kind of accept positions up against the cage like he was against Bubba Jenkins last time out. Obviously, he still ended up winning that fight, and he turned up the pressure in the second round, but it was an arm injury that ended up causing that fight to be stopped. But also, probably the momentum would have been on Braga's favor, and he probably could have come back and won that fight anyway. But Khizriev 16-0, is an absolute monster and does a great job in pretty much every aspect of MMA. He's an educated striker and knows when to mix in his clinch and grappling when he needs to keep opponents in bad positions. And I think that he's going to keep Braga on the defensive for the majority of this fight. I think we'll see Braga have glimpses of success with some of his striking, but for the most part, I think we're going to see him pushed up against the cage, taken down a few times, and have his back ridden a few times. And I think that's going to allow Khizriev to go out there and grind this fight out and win it on the scorecards. Co-main event takes place in the welterweight division with Magomed Umalatov coming in at a prohibitive minus 3,300 price tag, going up against Gracie, who comes in at plus 1,400. I'm not going to go too deep into this matchup. Umalatov, by pretty much however he wants. I think he eventually finds the knockout hero over Gracie. Maybe sprinkle that under 1.5 at plus 140, although I could see Gracie trying to stay safe enough and try to clinch, try to get this over the 1.5 round mark by just trying to get to his grappling. But I think Umalatov will be able to shut all that down, walk him down, and eventually knock him out within the first 7.5 minutes. And the main event, two strikers going at it here in the second of two featherweight playoff matchups. We got Brendan Loughnane coming in at minus 260, going up against Kamaka, who comes in at plus 220. Now, both these guys are strikers, but I definitely think that Loughnane is more capable of getting a finish, or at least making his strikes look a lot more damaging than what Kamaka brings to the table. Kamaka is a striker, but through his 14 professional fights, only 2 of them have come by finish. One of them was by submission, and the second was by ground and pound, so he's never actually knocked anybody out with his strikes. But he does a good job in terms of implementing a combination striking style, utilizing his footwork, changing stances, and utilizing 3, 4, 5 punch combinations to touch up his opponents and make it look clear that he deserves decision victories. But he's going up against a very zoned in and technical Brendan Loughnane, who has often leaned on his calf kick to debilitate his opponents and then start to let go with his strikes so that he can hurt them and get them out of there. Kamaka might be educated enough to shut that game down, as the last 2 opponents of Loughnane have done so, but Loughnane has made up for that by letting his hands go and utilizing that calf kick as a feint to throw his hands behind it and land with maximum damage. And I expect him to do that here against Kamaka. It wouldn't surprise me if Loughnane actually ends up getting the finish in this matchup, but for an official prediction, I'll actually lean him to win this by decision. There you guys go. I think chalk pretty much wins this entire card, but there was an underdog on there. If you guys remember that I was very keen on, let's see if he's able to bring it on home for us. Appreciate all the love. Appreciate all the support. Make sure you guys check out later tonight when I drop the top 3 lock of the night candidates, and then much later tonight, I'll be dropping the top 3 dog of the night candidates. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow for the free parlay segment, as well as the 3 best prop bets. Peace.
Last thing.